Hey guys, Michael here with Hello Cupcake It's Me, and I am doing a Q&A video today. I received a couple of requests to get to know me a little bit better, and one of them was about my employment history when I lived in California, and the other one was to talk about my biological mother some. So, I will start off with the biological mother aspect of it. I honestly don't know too much about her, like what is real and what is fantasy. She's always been a very hidden, very reserved, take everything she says with a grain of salt type of a person. The person that I know, she's very manipulative. She has this uncanny knack for being able to manipulate people and get outcomes to favor her. It's almost supernatural the way that she's able to kind of pull the wool over people's eyes and just dupe you. She's a from what other members of the family have told me, like her sisters, she's lived a very sordid, like just this really weird patchwork of life. She was born and raised in Fort Worth, Texas, or in the Fort Worth area. And her mother was just a raging alcoholic, free spirit, loose woman type of a person. Never really made the right choices with men or really had much self-respect or anything like that. Well, maybe not self-respect, I don't know. Very classical definition, white trash, hillbilly hick type of a woman. I refer to her as a bullvine of a woman because she was just this big, overly aggressive, loud, outspoken woman. And the whole goddamn family, my biological mother, my aunts, my uncles, my her mother, and her her stepdad, I guess it would be. They just all were really heavy smokers. Helen, which is my biological mom's mother, so my grandmother, she was just a hardcore raging alcoholic, and like I said, a woman of very loose morals. I think that they said that when she was younger, she would basically sleep with anything with a pulse. Gidget, my biological mother, her name wasn't always that. She changed her name in the mid-60s because she stabbed her stepfather in the back with a butcher knife and almost killed him, and so to escape prosecution or whatever for attempted murder, she changed her name and took on this new identity, and it was just kind of cohesively uniformed that the whole family just started calling her by her new assumed name. But she grew up on my great grandparents' ranch in I think it's Kingsman's, Texas, or King County, Texas, something like that. I've never been to Texas, so I don't know much about it. But apparently, my great-grandparents owned this expansive piece of land, and everyone within the town was related to my great-grandparents, and that's how the family kind of amassed their wealth. Well, because Helen and my biological mother were kind of like the black sheep of the family, they didn't get the debutantes and the cotillions and all that other stuff. Helen took off and left my biological mother with my great-grandparents on the ranch. And she had rheumatic fever, scarlet fever, and was just a really sickly child, and spent several years, by her own account, just in and out of the hospitals and laying in bed trying to basically just recover. She had a black nanny who was a servant, for lack of a better word. I mean, slavery had been abolished, but these were farm hands. Her name was Bertha, and she lived in a little garage above the horse pen, like a loft above the horse pen or pig pen or something like that. And I think it was I think Bertha's had a husband named John or something like that. But anyway, so Bertha basically raised my biological mother up. And the times being the times that they were, and the fact that it was Texas, you can imagine that Bertha wasn't treated as all that well. As far as I've been told by my aunt, who I trust with this information, and by my biological mother, Bertha was well taken care of, but she was basically like an indentured servant and had to live on the ranch, and that her and her family lived on the ranch until the great-grandparents passed away, and then they moved off. So, coming from an extremely wealthy family, my aunt actually took advantage of it, and she was the one that was like born with a silver spoon in her mouth, always had English horseback riding lessons, and this, that, and the other thing, where Gidget was kind of more off to the side, and just that like wild tomboy. Like whenever she wanted to do anything, she would just take one of the horses out of the pen and take off riding. She told me when I was little that it took like 2.5 days to get across the property by horseback. So how much of that's true and how much of it isn't, I don't know. Like I said, her past up to the point where I was born is kind of a mystery. My Aunt Bonnie told me one thing, my Aunt Charlotte told me another thing, this relative told me this, that relative told me that, so, you know, whatever. I can only account for my birth moving forward. She's always kind of fancied herself like a Dr. Dolittle type of a person. She has to have animals in her life. She has to have pets. A lot of times they're more like captives than pets, but that's a whole different story. So, like, my whole life I was brought up around animals. Like, when I was born, she had 2 rattlesnakes that lived on top of this refrigerator or whatever. My dad made her get rid of the rattlesnakes when I was able to start crawling. Before she met my father, she had an alligator that lived in a bedroom, and it would bark or do like this guttural sound, and she would go and throw it at a chicken or something. And yeah, so she's had so many animals. And growing up, she had this huge red ear slider, like about that big. His name was Buford. And really gorgeous 75-gallon tank that was like her pride and joy. And she always had fish and crawdads and just all kinds of like aquatic life living in there with her turtles. And then somehow we obtained 3 snapping turtles. I don't even remember what their species was. I just remember one's name was Simon. There was another one named Jezebel, and then I forget what the other one was because it passed away. Like we went to San Diego one time and we caught fiddler crabs and we brought a bunch of those back home with us. I'd say probably 97% of them exploded on the way to our house because where I grew up out at the Salton Sea in Southern California, it's 250 or 350 feet below sea level, and so we took them from San Diego, which is at sea level. We had to go up over a mountain and back down, and I guess the pressure was just too great. So, like 97% of this bucket of crabs that we caught made it back, and slowly and surely over like a year time period, they all kind of died off. How they managed to survive in a freshwater tank is beyond me, but you know, there's that. Out in Southern California, growing up during the 80s, in Joshua Tree and Yucca Valley, they used to have giant desert tortoise that roamed all over the place. They're fairly... I'm not going to say that they're extinct, but they're not as plentiful as they used to be. I don't know if over the years people coming through and taking them, or getting hit by cars on the roadway or whatever has decimated their population in that part of the desert, but it's not like it used to be. And I remember my dad, he used to go and party up in Barstow back when he was really heavy into drugs, and he brought home a tortoise to kind of like appease her. I guess they had gotten into a fight or something, and so he brought home one. Yeah, I know it's highly illegal, but you know, statutes of limitations on that is well passed over. So we always had just random critters living in our house. Even as a teenager, up to the point where I moved out, she had massive amounts of critters, and now that she lives, or even now, she's got like 3 birds, 3 birds, a guinea pig, a squirrel, fucking probably has an orangutan somewhere in her world. Just like, it's ridiculous. But anyways, through that I gained an affinity and a love of animals and so on and so forth. But yeah, she's just a very negative, dark person. Like I said earlier in the video, she always manipulated things and always manipulates things to work out in her favor. I don't know how she does it. I don't know if she's in league with the devil or whatever else, but I just, yeah. She, before she got divorced from my dad, she owned a movie store back when VHSs and all that other stuff was like all the rage, and Blockbusters and stuff like that were still around. In the little town of Desert Shores where I grew up, she owned a little movie store, and it did really well. And then after her and my dad got a divorce, we moved to another town, and the divorce was extremely freaking hard on me because for about a year and a half prior to them getting their divorce, she used to ask me all the time what would I think of living in a new town or moving away from where we lived and stuff like that. And being a kid, I didn't know any better. I just said, "Yeah, mommy, that sounds like a great idea." I think dad would like it and all this other stuff, not knowing or understanding that she was kind of gauging how I would feel about it, and kind of making plans to sabotage or terminate the marriage that she was in with my father. Um, she's not an easy person to be around, let alone to live with, in any regard. She's extremely vindictive, and she doesn't hold grudges. She harbors them, meaning that you could have done something to her back when Christ was walking the earth, and she would still be pissed off at you for it. And not a very forgiving person. Growing up, she used to use manipulative tactics on me and my sister, and do these like massive guilt trips where it would be just like, oh well, you did this and this, and I don't know if I can ever trust you again type situation. And as kids you're just like, no mommy, I'm sorry, whatever. But yeah, so after my parents got divorced, and we moved to this new city, I got to meet relatives I didn't even know I had. And they weren't exactly blood relatives. I mean, her brother, my uncle, he ended up marrying one of the a friend of theirs from like childhood. So that's kind of how like our two family trees came together. But we always just considered each other family because, well, that's just what they did. Very like 49ers in that you come together as a community and you help each other out. Like if their power got shut off, they would run an extension cord from our house to their house and then help pay part of our bill. If our phone got shut off, we would go over and use their phone to make calls. If we didn't have enough food, then we would take what we had over next door, and then we would combine and we would all sit down and have dinner together, or whatever meal it was. There was a time there, though, that it was just a very interesting, negative hodgepodge of just bullfuckery that went on. It seemed like every freaking weekend the cops were over at our house because this person got in a fight with that person, and this son of a bitch did this, and I'm gonna call the cops on you and for this and that and the other thing. So needless to say, we got very well acquainted with the small town PD. During that time period, I was sort of a free roaming spirit, like from the age of about 10 to 16, 17. I pretty much came and went as I pleased. I had no supervision whatsoever 90% of the time. And there was other times where I would come home and there would be absolutely no food in the house, and her boyfriend would be gone, and it would just be like, okay, I'm home from school, I'm hungry, I've had a bad day, because I was horribly picked on as a child. And so there was just times where I wanted to come home and just talk to my mom and like vent my frustrations, but she she had a she had and has a gambling problem also. Um, so on the first of the month, when her welfare check would come in and my child support and all that other shit would come in, she would take that money and go to the casino and basically move in out there. It got to the point where I had all the casinos' phone numbers memorized, and even the operators there knew who I was. And I'd call up, be like, "Hi, this is Michael. Can you please page my mom?" Because I'm just like, I want to know when they're coming home. I'm hungry. There's no food in the house, and sometimes the neighbors had already eaten, and if they were feuding with my mom at the time or whatever else, um, it was just a really difficult situation. So there were times where I just didn't eat, or I learned how to shoplift at a really young age. So I started shoplifting when I was about 11 or 12, and I'd come home. They'd say, "Oh yeah, we'll be home by 4." 6:30, 7 o'clock rolls around, they're still not home, and I'm freaking hungry, and I can't go to the neighbor's house and ask for food. So I would have to go to like the local supermarket, and I would just walk through the aisles, and I became very very inept at just stealing food. And it became such a second nature to me that as I was walking through the store and I got hungry, I would take something off the shelf and eat it, and do it in such a way that the cameras never caught me and the product never left. I mean, well, it left because it was in my stomach, but I tried to, when I turned 14, it was it was like the summer that I turned 14, or maybe, it was like 13, 14. Anyways, my school started doing ROTC and JOTC. Yeah, on ROTC and on-the-job training and all that other stuff. And I attempted to go through that program, but my grades weren't good enough, so they didn't want to let me go through the program or whatever. And like, no, I want to work. I want to earn an income. I want to do these things. And I tried to explain to them, listen, my family life sucks, and I need this money to kind of survive. CPS wasn't as prevalent as it is today, because by today's standards, I would have been in the system, or I would have been removed from living with my mother like a long time ago. Or so there's a lot of issues there, but anyways, so for the most part though, I was a really good kid. Like, I was on a first name basis with the mayor of the town and with the police chief, and I was part of the DARE program. I was part of Friday Night Lights, or no, something like Friday Night Live. Friday Night Live is what it was, which was like a preteen teen drug advocacy program. We got like a little membership card and all this other stuff, and on Fridays we would have lunch parties, or we would watch movies or whatever else, and like no one else could join in because you had to be a member of this club. I also became part of the Community Action Plan Club, where we would go to the nursing homes and read to the elderly people there, or just sit and talk with them. And I was a Boy Scout there for a little while, but due to financial restrictions, I wasn't allowed to stay as a Boy Scout because the uniform was like $130 something, and then each time I got a new badge, that was a price, and my scout book was a price, and I needed to have money to go on the field trips, and I had to have this for that, and so on and so forth. So that wasn't long lived. But yeah, when I was 15, maybe 16, things became very violent and volatile in my life, especially regarding her. Um, by that point, most, if not all, of my friends were tweakers and drug users of some sort or another. My cousin, who lived next door to me, was cooking meth in her basement, had traffic coming in and out at all times of the day and night. I knew who had what in the town, who was getting what, why, like the quantities and this, that, and the other thing. I watched them do meth. I watched them make it. I watched them do all these other things, and I never touched meth. Never. I had the desire to do so, but having seen my father, who was a heavy, hardcore alcoholic drug user for most of my life, and seeing the shit he went through, I had that craving to try it, but I never touched it. But that I was in the thick of it. I was running around with different gang members, like they were small town gang members, nothing like MS-13 or freaking any of that other shit, like the Crips or the Bloods. Well, one of the gangs was like Crips and are a Crip affiliation, or however the hell that works, I don't know. But anyways, I was able to kind of seamlessly move between these different groups. There was this South Side Beaumont gang. There was the North Side Beaumont. There was the 14th Street gang. There was this gang, that gang, or whatever else. And I had friends in all of them and could kind of seamlessly interact and commingle, because, no one ever saw me as a threat. I was a very shy, soft-spoken, really wouldn't look people in the eyes type of a kid. It wasn't until my 10th grade year in American history class that I finally started speaking out for myself. And I remember that it was kind of revolutionary for me. So that backstory kind of plays into this next part that I'm going to be telling you about my biological mother. So with her, though, like I said, there was absolutely no parental supervision, and she was very manipulative and very just my way or the highway, and not willing to negotiate or talk about things. She was very crocodilian in the fact that she never cried, but if she did cry, it was to gain sympathy from other people, or to use that to manipulate the situation. So when I was, like I said, 15, 16, she started messing around with this guy named Bobby, who was a drug dealer and part of a gang and all this other stuff. And I had known Bobby for about 6 or 7 years prior to that. I knew his drug habits. I knew his day-to-day life habits, the whole 9 yards. Like, the man was extremely predictable. He would wake up with an 8-ball of speed and go to sleep with an 8-ball of speed. And drink and smoke weed and fuck and do whatever all day long, every day long. So, yeah, he was an interesting person. So, anyways, when she started fucking around with him, it kind of like threw this huge upheaval and this wrench into my life and everyone's life at the time. Um, at the time, she's always been one of those people who her front door is open to whoever wants to walk through it, but there's always going to be conditions and strings. And the minute you outlive your usefulness to her, then you're a son of a bitch and you have to get the hell out of her house, and she's going to call the cops and just make your life a living freaking hell. So growing up, there was always strangers in and out of the house, and I never knew what I was going to come home to. There would be times that I'd come home and there would be somebody sleeping in my bed, or, oh yeah, this is so and so, they're going to stay with us for a little while type situations. And then they would get like, they would think that they had a right to say something to me or whatever, and then they would start to try to discipline me or like talk shit to me and things like that. So I had to learn to defend myself against adults and these other like derelicts of life, and stuff like that. And looking back, I probably should have called my dad a lot sooner than I did, but I didn't. I was too independent at that time, and I really wanted to stay that way, and I didn't like the fact that I had to adhere to a schedule or do whatever it was. So yeah, when I was like I said, 15, 16, she started sleeping with this guy Bobby, caused a huge upheaval in our household, and it was like a full-on family brawl between our family, the next door neighbors, her, Bobby, everyone was just fighting. And I disappeared. I took off and I went hiding, and I went to the last place that anyone would have expected to find me, and it was a church. I just went to this little alcove over by this church and hid in the bushes for a little while and cried and tried to get a handle on my life at that moment, and just like, okay, you've cried your tears, now go handle this. And so I went and I found her, and me, her, and Bobby went walking to the library, and she told me that if I couldn't accept her decision, that I was a piece of shit, I was a disappointment, she should never have had me, I wasn't her son, she didn't love me, and to get the fuck out of her life. That basically she was choosing him over me. I was like, okay, fuck you very much. I left her, I went straight home, I called my dad. It was about 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, and I said, Dad, there's been a bunch of shit that just happened. If it's okay, I need to move in with you. Can you come and get me tomorrow? And so after I had that talk with him, I then packed up all of my shit, and I was out by 1 o'clock that next afternoon. So, like, everything happened, let's say, like 10:30 at night on a Monday. By 1 p.m. Tuesday, I was gone. And we didn't talk for a good maybe 4 or 5 years after that. Like, she didn't ever do anything. She never called me for my birthday. She never went to my graduation. She wasn't there. And then she shows up all of a sudden out of the blue and then tries talking to me. And at that point, I was done with her. Like, I was just absolutely done. The mother-son dynamic was gone, and it was more of a strained friendship, if you could even call it that. So yeah, throughout the years, I have learned that a lot of my anger toward her was, a lot of my anger towards certain people in my life was anger that I should have placed on her. And thankfully I had the foresight when I was about 21 to forgive her boyfriend at the time, because me and him, we had just this shitty ass relationship. Because it was basically like Wednesday she broke up with my dad, Friday she was with her boyfriend type situation. So I had no chance to even adjust and get used to the idea of it no longer being mom, dad, and me. More just me and mom, and now this new dude and my overly aggressive, bitchy grandmother. So yeah, that was that's been interesting. When I moved here to Washington, she was staying with us for just a brief period of time in California. Well, she stayed with us twice, or 2 different times in California. Once she was living with us when our house burnt down, and then the second time she was living with us like right before we moved up here, and she caused a whole bunch of problems for my sister and I. Before we moved up here, we were living in this really nice trailer park over in like the Riverside area, and she just caused a lot of problems, went around the neighborhood talking shit to our neighbors and people that we didn't even talk to, that we didn't even really know. And she stirred up a bunch of problems there. And so me and my sister and my niece, we moved up here to Washington. And then like we weren't here even 3 years before she tried to talk her way into like, hey, can I come and stay with you? Me and my boyfriend, the one that just passed away, I talked about him in the last video, I think. Me and my boyfriend, we got in a fight. He pistol whipped me. He did this, that, and the other thing. I went to the DA, and they're giving me money to relocate, and this, that, and the other thing. And begrudgingly, we said, okay, if you move in with us, though, there's going to be circumstances and things that you have to do in order to stay with us, because we don't want to be part of that life anymore. At the time, my niece was extremely young. We didn't want her around that shit. And so she haphazardly agreed to it. Sorry about that. My sister had just walked in, and she wasn't supposed to be here for like another 30-45 minutes, so she kind of caught me off guard. And I don't even remember where I left off. So I think the last thing that I said was that my mother, or my biological mother, really just wasn't there, and she was very absent. And growing up, she was extremely self-centered. Like, everything revolved around her. If she got a splinter, she could go to the doctor, but if it was something for me, people had to literally fight to get her in there to assist, or to get me to go to a doctor or whatever. I remember I had chicken pox, and all I really wanted to do was sleep and be left the fuck alone, and I never should have went home from my dad's, because my grandma and my dad would have had better bedside manners than she did, but I digress. So yeah, but after my so the whole thing with the chicken pox, you know, I had to go to the doctor because it was burning when I was peeing, and so the doctor had to check to see if I had internal chicken pox in my urethra or whatever, and that was like a fight and a half just to get her to take me. So yeah, it was not the best of times. So when we moved up here to Washington, I now remember, she said that she wanted to move up here because her boyfriend or whatever had abused her. And so we told her, okay, go ahead and come up here. There's going to be stipulations, whatever, not circumstances. Now I remember, I got my train of thought back. There's going to be stipulations to you moving up here with us. And we cannot have all of your critters. So, you know, you're going to have to leave those behind, whatever else. So she said, okay, well, I'm coming up and I'll be up there in a few days. Okay, cool, fine, whatever. She told me that her friend Mike had somebody who lived in Seattle, and he was driving up anyways to go see them, and she was hitching a ride with them. I was like, okay, cool, whatever. Just call me when you are close to us, and I will let you know how to get to our house from there. So she's over in the Linwood, Seattle area, and she calls me up, and she says, okay, I'm over here by Seattle, how do I get to you? And I said, well, you still have 3.5 hours to drive to get to me. And before I gave her the information on how to get to my house, I heard her boyfriend talking. And I was like, is that your boyfriend? She's all, yeah. And I went the fuck off on her. I'm like, what the actual fuck? You are not supposed to be with him. You told me you were coming up here by yourself, this, that, and the other thing, blah, 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 blah. What were you going to do? Just show up and expect us to let you come in with him? Like, I really have nothing against him. It was just, she was telling us that she wanted to get away from him and that she didn't want to be with him and that this, that, and the other thing was happening. And I told her, I said, no. You are nowhere near where we live. We are 3.5 hours away from there. You're not ever going to find us. So, you need to turn around and go back to California. Well, we fucking can't. We barely had enough money to make it up here. I said, that's not my problem. You made the choice to be deceitful. You made the choice to come up here with him, telling me and telling my sister that you had a friend who was bringing you up here, not your boyfriend. No. Absolutely not. You may not come. Figure it the fuck out. And I hung up on her. And she called me back and cussed me out. You fucking son of a bitch. I'm like, oh, so sorry. Wrong number. Click. Called me back. Did you just hang up on me? I don't know. Does it sound like this? Click. Hung up on her again. So, a day and a half went by, and she called me back. And she's like, we're sleeping underneath a truck over in Tacoma, and our car got confiscated with all of our animals, all of our stuff. We have just the clothes that's on our back. Can you help us? I said, boy, gee, golly whiz, that's a horrible situation. Your boyfriend is VA, call them. Sorry, here's the phone number, bye. Click. 3 days goes by, she calls. Well, the VA is going to help us. They're taking us down to Portland, and they're going to put us up in a shelter there and help us get a place. I'm like, see? Everything worked out. So, ever since then, that was like 2009, 2010? No. Yeah, 2009, 2010, somewhere right in there, in that time period. She's lived in Portland, Oregon. And, she's never been to our house because if she finds out how to get to our house, she will show up in the middle of the night with all of her shit like, okay, put me up. And she is extremely rude and disrespectful. My sister and I, we don't smoke, In the state of Washington, well, in most states now, but especially here in the state of Washington, it's illegal to smoke in your house, and especially if you're renting. Like my landlord said, if I walk into your house and it smells like smoke, you're gonna be in trouble, type situation. When we lived in California, we didn't smoke. We told her, do not smoke in our house. She would light her cigarette on the stove in the kitchen, and instead of walking out the back door, which was literally a foot away from the stove, she would then walk through the whole house into the living room, out to the front patio to sit down and smoke. So I know I would tell her, do not smoke in the house, and I'd come home, or I'd wake up in the middle of the night and she'd be smoking in here. Well, it's cold outside, it's raining outside, I don't give a fuck. Take you and your cigarettes and get the hell outside, and I don't want to do that. And because of her powers of manipulation and her ability to make things work out for her, the town that we live in is extremely small. Everyone knows everyone, everyone slept with everyone, everyone's related to everyone type situation. And the people up here know me, my sister, and my niece as certain type of people because we left our entire identity in California when we moved here. And so, just like, if she got up here, she would weasel her way in and then start spreading her lies and negativity, and then she would let the other tweakers know, hey, this is where my sister, or this is where my daughter lives, this is where my son lives. Oh yeah, my son has XYZ in his house. Next thing I know, people are breaking into my house, my car's getting stolen or fucked up, I'm getting jumped, you know. It sounds like a jump to conclusions type situation, but that's how it works with her. She thrives in chaos and negativity. If she's traditionally happy, she's absolutely fucking miserable. When she's in the squalor, slums, weight of the world, everything going wrong, the house is on fire, she's sitting there sipping tea, smoking a cigarette, like, oh god, this is so much better, you know, that type of person. So, I have very limited interactions with her anymore. Typically about once a year, my sister and I will make the pilgrimage to Portland to go see her. This last time that we went to Portland, however, we did not see her. And it's actually been about 2.5 years, maybe 3 since we've seen her. I talk to her every once in a while on the phone. She just recently got mad at me because she wanted to come up here and visit with a friend of hers because her and her boyfriend were fighting, and this is back when he was still doing a little bit better, but they were fighting and she wanted to come up and visit, and I told her absolutely not. No. Sorry. If you want us to see you, we'll come to you. You can't come to us. And so she got all pissed off and she didn't talk to me for about a month, and that was July. So she just recently started talking to me within the last month and a half. And I'm like, whatever, I don't need you. My mom will answer my phone calls whenever I need her, and she's there whenever I need her. And then she gets so pissed off when I refer to my stepmom as my mother. She's not your mother. I'm like, well, you're not. You were just my first apartment, so there's that. And that pissed her off. Actually, I don't think she even understood what I meant by you're my first apartment, but yeah, so there's that. I know this video is extremely long, so I'm going to cut it off here and then do a part 2 to the work and stuff that I did when I lived in California. So yeah, stay tuned for part 2, guys. And if you've watched this far, thank you so much. And as always, if you need to talk to me, hit me up. HelloCupcakeGetsMe@gmail.com. Hit like and subscribe if you haven't done so already, and the little bell note icon. Questions, comments, concerns down below, and I will see you in the next video. Bye, guys.